Welcome to the Creative Penn podcast. I'm Joanna Penn, thriller author and creative entrepreneur, bringing you interviews, inspiration and information on writing craft and creative business. You can find the episode show notes, your free author blueprint and lots more at thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And here's the show. Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn and this is episode number 874 of the podcast, and it is Monday the 20th of July 2026 as I record this for the new Wednesday shows. In today's show I'm talking to Stephen James about organic writing and the power of the pivot and why he doesn't think about publishing or marketing but obsesses about story. So that's coming up in the interview section. In writing and publishing and marketing, last week I mentioned the Tim Ferriss article about the decline of non-fiction self-help book sales. And this week he has a follow-up article from Kevin Kelly, futurist and author, who was on this show in episode 689, a couple of years ago now in 2023. Now, Kevin has updated his article, Better Than Free, for the Age of AI. And he originally wrote that in 2008, which is also the year he wrote 1,000 True Fans, the article, which just shows how prescient he is because many of us have circled back to 1,000 True Fans these days. Now, I wanted to talk about this today as it can be applied to us as authors with books to sell and with, for many of us, a business to run, an income to make. And so the important things to think about. So here are my comments on the article, but definitely go read the full thing at tim.blog. Links in the comments as ever. So the basic principle is that when copies are free, you need to sell things which cannot be copied. So it's a quote from the article. When copies are free, you need to sell things which cannot be copied. Now you might say, oh, but my book isn't free. It's at $9.99 or whatever. But of course, with Kindle Unlimited, with unlimited listening on Spotify and Audible, and there are lots of ways to get unlimited books for essentially free or very, very cheap. Digital is very cheap. Now, he goes on to say trust, for example, takes a long time to build and must be earned and can be destroyed very quickly, which is why I'm increasingly careful about who I bring on and which companies I work with as sponsors. And as I always say to people, if you haven't heard of a company here for a couple of years, then don't assume I still endorse people or companies. Things change. But right now, the people who sponsor the show and everything, I trust and know personally as well as use. So yeah, trust so important, especially in this age of scams and spams and all that. And then Kevin describes 8 other things, which will hopefully spark some ideas for you as we go through them. So first up, immediacy. Getting something early and before it's available everywhere else. And this is increasingly why many of us now sell on Kickstarter first or direct from our own stores or any other way to have immediacy. So it's buy from us now rather than wait for when the book comes out a couple of months later. So Bones of the Deep, for example, people who bought that on Kickstarter got the ebook back in April, and you can now find it on Amazon and my store and everywhere else. But to get it early, you had to buy on the Kickstarter. So that is a way for immediacy. Because of course, once it's out there everywhere, people can buy it today or next month or next year, or they might just think, why should I buy it now? There's no reason to buy it now. So what can you offer that is immediate or special or early? Then personalisation. This is super hard to do at scale unless you're using technology. I'm sure you've seen the kids' books where you can upload a photo and you're sent a book with the child as a cartoon and their name as the character. And I see that whenever I go to London, there's always an advert on the London Underground for a company that does that. But what can we do? This is actually quite difficult, but it is the personally signed copy with an individual message as opposed to just a signed copy with no message. And to be fair, I just do signed copies with no message. The reason being is when we did the first Kickstarter and I went up to Book Vault up in Peterborough and I went to sign all the books, and originally we were going to sign them all to individuals, but then we looked at the number we were shipping and my numbers are nowhere near some author numbers. And if you think about the potential of signing, let's say I signed to Peter And then Peter's book arrives and you're not Peter. And so you didn't get the right book and Peter also got the wrong book. And so that's 2 books I have to fix, even though you got a book. So at that point, I just made a pragmatic decision that it could potentially be too expensive if we got it wrong. So unless you're putting things in packages yourself, it can be, thinking about personalisation. Probably the most personalised thing I do is the one-on-one consulting sessions, which I only sell through the Kickstarter. And of course, there's only a few of those. There are obviously people who do video messages to fans. There are things you can do. So something to think about, but very important with personalisation is think about the pragmatic idea of what you want to provide. Certainly with the signed hardbacks, they're very expensive. So as in they're expensive to replace. And of course, if it doesn't arrive, then you're going to get another one. But if you're having to buy extra copies because you sent the wrong name to the wrong person, imagine just doing that to everyone, for example. This is not a good thing. So yeah, personalization, difficult, but potentially very valuable. Now, of course, I do meet people at events. So certainly at the SPS Live, which was in London, people actually bring books for me to sign, and then I can sign them to that person because they're holding the book. So I guess that's one way, is to actually do a signing in person. And here's a tip for that. I've been along to these things, and of course, spelling the name can be difficult, even if it's something simple. If it's Sarah, is it Sarah with an H or without an H, or is it spelt in a different way? So one tip for this is take a stack of Post-it notes and get people to write their name on the Post-it note. And then when they come to you and say, oh, hey, can you sign my book? It's to Joe, instead of saying Joe, J-O, when someone might write J-O-E, for example, then they've got the spelling right there. So that's a tip. If you're doing in-person signings, get people to write their name on a Post-it so that you get that right the first time. Otherwise, again, it can be expensive if you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I just ruined your book. Or you just had to cross out your name and spell it in a different way. So yes, that's personalization. Then there's interpretation, which is explanations of what is happening. And that's really what I do here in the show introduction. What I'm doing right now really is a sort of interpretation. It could be a sort of curation idea. And also in my Patreon around AI, I'm not selling AI tools to you. I'm interpreting them for you in useful ways so that you can use them in ways that benefit you as an author and as a business person. Kevin also has patronage as one of the elements, which obviously fits into my Patreon. And this also leads into authenticity, which can be around people. So of course, regular listeners will know it is authentic for me to share about AI and do AI tutorials and stuff, since I've been talking about it since 2016 and I was an IT consultant before I was an author. So I'm extremely well used to explaining technology. That's what I did as a job for like 13 years. So I'm clearly not faking anything. It's very authentic for me to do that. I think we can all tell, right? We can tell if people are doing something just to jump on a bandwagon. But of course, authenticity can also be around books. A signed copy with your real signature is authentic. So that's kind of what I aim for in my Kickstarters, which is I rarely do signed books. So when I do, and you've got one with actual ink, that is authentic. Digital watermarks you can do through BookFunnel if you want to do that to show this is a real authentic copy. Something that shows it is really your book. And again, much easier to do for limited runs like a Kickstarter campaign. Then embodiment, and Kevin uses hardcover books as an example. So ebooks and digital audio are disembodied. They don't have a physical container, but the hardback is a designed embodiment of the book. You actually design the book, or you're working obviously with a book designer. And also he goes further on this. For example, if you're a speaker, the hardback book might actually be free. You might be charging a speaker fee. The hardback book is free, but the author speaking in person at the event is the paid element. And of course, when speakers, certain niches anyway, not the author niche, but certainly if you are speaking at a corporate event, then you might be paid a high speaking fee. And so the books, especially if you're doing longer print runs, you can get hardback books printed for very cheaply if you're doing a bigger volume. And then so the event is the paid amount, and that is because you're there in person. And in-person events obviously being the highest value and most difficult to scale. So certainly I do have plans to do in-person events here in Bath. It is a UNESCO World Heritage City. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein here. Jane Austen also wrote about it. So we have both Jane Austen festivals and Frankenstein. So it's a wonderful city for writers. And I am thinking of doing events again, but not this year. We shall see. Maybe next year. Depends on a lot of things, but I absolutely have an intention to do in-person events. I've even looked at a retreat centre. So yeah, it is something I'm thinking about. Also, several people have said they would love to come on a travel research trip with me. So come with me on a research trip. So let's pick somewhere like Rome and the Vatican, and I would plan the trip and we would go and I would show you things that I think are quite weird and macabre and part of my inspiration. And yeah, it's something I've thought about as well. Might do that in the future. So that's the in-person event, which is Embodiment. Then there's accessibility. So even if you can get something for free, you're often willing to pay for ease of use, which is why we don't worry about piracy, because most lovely readers are happy to buy or borrow from legitimate sources, and it is easier to access rather than risk a dodgy download file full of viruses. And that's why many readers and listeners will always prefer their Kindle device or their Kobo device or their Audible or Spotify app over buying direct from authors and figuring out how to read or listen. However easy it is, people want ease of access, and that is why together we have to educate people to buy from us. So whether they buy the ebook on a Kickstarter or from someone's store and then get it on BookFunnel, we all educate the reader base together, one reader at a time. Interestingly, I was talking to Damon at BookFunnel and he said readers now actually educate authors around this, in that they will say if an author is offering an art copy, they'll be like, oh, can't you just give me a BookFunnel link? So people are actually joining BookFunnel as authors because readers are asking. So that's really good, because it does mean we are educating the reader base together. And then finally, findability, in that free can make something easier to ignore. And we all know this, because if you just upload your book to Amazon or any other store, it doesn't matter what price you use, whether it's free or $9.99 or whatever, no one will find it unless you do some marketing. We are in a time of saturation, certainly digital saturation, and so you have to put effort into being found. As Kevin says, being found is valuable, and that's why we pay Amazon and Meta for ad traffic and all the other things we do to be found. Now, Kevin says ads do work, but I think they are only one of the paths that attention takes. And in the long run, they will only be part of the new ways money is made selling free. And of course, this podcast is one of the paths that attention takes. And I don't advertise this show. I've never paid for ads to boost the creative pen in any way. It really grows through word of mouth. So I always appreciate when you share about this show, or you leave a comment or a rating on one of the podcast apps. So yeah, this podcasting is one of the paths of attention. And Kevin ends with, these 8 demand an understanding of how abundance breeds a sharing mindset, how generosity is a business model, how vital it has become to cultivate and nurture qualities that can't be replicated with a click of the mouse. These are very human skills, which AIs are not very good at, yet. So as ever, it's about doubling down on being human. Yes, it is. And for many authors, this is a challenge, because for years, we've been able to rely on the digital economy, which has scale, which you can scale really easily. But now scale is easy to replicate. So the challenge for you this week is to think about how you can use some of these elements for your books, for your marketing, for your business, for whatever. And those 8 again are immediacy, personalisation, interpretation, authenticity, accessibility, embodiment, patronage, and findability. And you can go read the whole article. It's on tim.blog, and the article is Better Than Free for the Age of AI from Kevin Kelly. Links in the show notes as ever. So in personal news, I finished my trailer and my screenplay treatment for what is now called Cathedral Zero. The original working title was Reborn, which I've talked a bit about, but as ever, my working titles usually get changed. Once I figure out what the hell the story is, which kind of fits into today's interview, which is very much about discovery writing, which Stephen calls organic writing, and this is still how I create after all these years. Even with AI, this is just how my brain works. I think that there are plotters, natural plotters, and there are natural discovery writers. And of course, everyone has a bit of both, but I have definitely found that I can corral myself a little bit, but essentially this is what you love. You have to do what you love as well. And I love the chaos of the sort of going around and interesting things and all of this. And this Cathedral Zero, anyway, is for the Future Vision X Prize, which is all about producing positive visions of the future. So more like Star Trek than Star Wars. And you actually have to use AI tools to do it. It is one of the rare prizes right now that actually says you have to use AI. And one of the points is to use AI in a positive way. So the idea is all mine. No one else is likely to come up with Gothic cathedrals merged with plant intelligence. This is a very J.F. Penn story. If you've read Tree of Life, for example, it's got a lot of plant intelligence and that kind of wild nature. I often do wild nature in my books. I guess Blood Vintage is also wild nature. And then, the Gothic cathedral thing is so very me. So anyway, I collaborated with Claude on the story itself, which is a thriller. And yes, there is a storm. The storms in my books are also very me. And we wrote the treatment together, and Claude wrote the image prompts based on my vision. And then I used Midjourney to create the main images and the characters, and then ChatGPT to put them together. Because if you don't know, ChatGPT does excellent images right now, better than Gemini, Nano Banana, at least at the moment. I think ChatGPT is the best image model at the moment. And especially because let's say you can upload 3 still images, so 2 characters and a setting, and just say these 2 characters are working together in this garden, and it does exactly that. And so it keeps the characters consistent across your different things. And then I used the Sea Dance model through Runway ML to do the video clips. So essentially I took the still images and then animated them. Now I can't unfortunately share the video with you until after the 15th of August, as it's part of the judging process. And I won't know until after that whether I'm in the sort of shortlist or whatever, but I will share as soon as I can. I'll also do a how-to video for patrons once it is out. But basically, lots of iteration. Now, some people seem to think that, creating with AI is just click a button and output some kind of perfection. But of course, that is not how it works, especially if you have a very strong creative vision, which is what I have. And I was thinking about this. I think the stronger your creative muscle, perhaps, and the stronger your creative confidence, the less likely you are to feel afraid of AI taking anything from you. I find it is expansive for me. It helps me think more expansively. Anyway, I ended up with RSI in my right shoulder, my right wrist again, because when you do these images, you have to basically rerun, tweak the prompt, do it again. So it took me about 8 hours after I've been working on this for months on and off to do the treatment and the idea and the story Bible and all that. It took me about 8 hours to make the 90-second video. And I could only make the video once, of course, I had the whole treatment and the characters and the plot. But of course, the trailer is more than the plot. It has to do feelings. Also, I should have said I used 11 Labs to generate the music, and I got Claude to write a prompt for the music. So it wrote a really long prompt for the music, which I only had to adjust slightly for the timings of the images on screen. But yeah, I was really happy with that. I do love custom book trailer music because that's on 11 Labs. And I know there's lots of tools you can use, but that's what I used. So on this prize, so the Future Vision X Prize, I have put the link in the show notes. You basically have until 15th of August. So if you want to enter it, there are some very, very big prizes. This is a proper professional prize. It's got nothing to do with X, by the way. The X Prize runs lots and lots of different prizes for Star Trek ideas. They had one for the tricorder, and they have lots of prizes on abundance, essentially. It's Peter Diamandis, who is a Moonshots podcast. That's where I heard about this. So anyway, it is available until 15th of August, Future Vision X Prize, if you have ideas of positive views of technology and the future. But I have heard now that there's over 4,000 entries. So yes, most of those will also be professional film people, because of course everybody wants to make a movie. But whatever happens, I will probably turn it into a book in 2027, as I love the concept and the characters and I want to write about them, and we could all use some more positive visions of the future. So that's mainly what I've been working on in the last week, is because I had everything, but in order to enter, you had to finish this trailer. The treatment had to include the whole film, but also things about your process and your personal statements and the log line and all of that kind of stuff. So got that in, really happy with that. The short story book is with Kristen for edits, and I'm circling back to my dissertation. It is time for finishing energy on the Masters in Death, Religion and Culture. And once I finish that, I will do a show on it, because it's around what happens to all of our digital records and things after we die. So I think that might be quite interesting for some of you, at least. Let's face it, we're all going to die and we all have a digital record of some kind. So yeah, should be really relevant for everyone. Right, thanks for all your emails and comments this week. Lots about the move to Wednesday, and all of them positive. So thank you for that. I did get so many, I can't read them all. But Ian emailed and said, your brilliantly informative podcast has been getting me through Monday gym sessions for I don't know how long. But luckily for me, I also go on Wednesdays. So it's a thumbs up. Thanks, Ian. Diana says, your switch to Wednesday totally works for me. I hope the move brings you extra space and freedom you need and are looking for. And yes, this last weekend, I was not worrying about the podcast on Saturday. I actually went kayaking. So I went river kayaking here in Bath, really enjoyed it. Beautiful weather right now. So that was lovely. Actually went down the weir. If you know Bath, we have a weir. I wouldn't be doing that after heavy rain, but it was fine. I went over the weir and did a bit of kayaking on the river, which was lovely. And yesterday, I almost forgot what day it was, because normally I'm stressing about getting the podcast out. So now, obviously, I'm doing this on Monday. So I already feel the difference in my life. So thank you so much. And finally, @likes to read on YouTube said, wow, we're entering the Wednesday Creative Penn podcast era. I am so here for it. And that made me laugh, because, and some others of you have pointed out, there was the theme tune change a few years ago, and I was stressed about that. It's like, oh, if I change the theme tune, some of you would be really upset, and what should we do? And actually someone emailed and said, oh, I remember when you changed the theme tune and I was really worried I wouldn't want to listen anymore, and now I can't even remember it. So sometimes what we think is a big deal is just not a big deal. So thank you for all that, and I'm very happy with the Wednesday. So thanks for all the comments around that. I really appreciate that. Natalie sent a picture and also a link to her Substack essay written at the funeral of a sheep on a farm. And first of all, if you have watched The Sheep Detectives, this will make you emotional. And I do recommend The Sheep Detectives. It is a really lovely movie. Oh, another thing I'll just recommend, completely different, is Ride or Die. It is excellent. It's got Hannah Waddingham, who is in Ted Lasso. She is just fantastic. I just love her so much. And Octavia Spencer, who is also amazing and is a great series. It's on Amazon Prime. All the episodes are there now. I just binged it over the weekend. And if you are a woman of a certain age, or you enjoy action, adventure, comedy in general, it is just brilliant. So that's Ride or Die. Anyway, back to Natalie and her reflections on memento mori in the essay, which made me think. So this was, back on the funeral of a sheep on a farm. And she asks a question inspired by the book, What Colour is Your Parachute? And the question is, what do you want there to be more of in the world because you once lived? So what do you want there to be more of in the world because you once lived? And it is such a good question. And that's actually one of the reasons I started the Creative Penn back in the day. I decided I wanted to help inspire 1 million new books in the world. And I don't know where I'm up to now, but a lot of you email me and say that I helped you get your book into the world. And that makes me very happy. And of course, I measure my life by what I create. So more stories, more books, more beauty. And if I create a spark in you, that makes me very happy. So thanks to Natalie. And her site is sparrowcrowfarm.substack.com, and I'll put that link in the show notes. And very interesting to think about these things. What do you want there to be more of in the world because you once lived? What do you think? Okay, please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or email me, send me pictures of where you're listening or your favourite cemetery or churchyard. Joanna@thecreativepenn.com. I love to hear from you. It makes this more of a conversation. Today's show is sponsored by Draft2 Digital, who I use to publish ebooks wide to Apple, Nook and library services, and also to do the payment splitting for my co-written books. They also do print. Are you an indie author in need of an easy and efficient print-on-demand service backed by a world-class customer support team? Yes, human support for you. Look no further than D2D Print from Draft2 Digital, ideal for authors who've already published ebooks but haven't yet done print. You can convert an ebook to print-on-demand file with just a few clicks, turn an ebook cover image into a full wraparound print cover in seconds, choose from dozens of beautiful interior layouts, and industry-standard trim sizes and formatting options. Distribute your print-on-demand files worldwide, use Draft2 Digital's free ISBNs, order author copies within 32 countries, and order print proofs without proof stamped on every book, and use free change tokens every 90 days to make updates to your published books. Print on demand is a game changer for indie authors because while brick and mortar bookstores can't physically stock every book, they can check for the print on demand availability of a book when a customer requests it. If you only publish ebooks, you could be missing a huge opportunity to reach more readers. Let's fix that with D2D Print. Just go to draft2digital.com to find out more. That's draft2digital.com. So this type of corporate sponsorship pays for the hosting, transcription and editing, but my time in creating the show is sponsored by my community at patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Thanks to the 7 new patrons who've joined this week, and thanks to everyone who's been supporting for months and years. If you join the community, you get access to all my backlist videos and audio covering writing craft, author business and AI tutorials. Last week, I shared my P&L from my last Kickstarter. So that's my profit and loss statement from my last Kickstarter. So you could see behind the scenes and where the costs were and where the profit came in and my thoughts on how it went. The Patreon is a monthly subscription, the equivalent of buying me a black coffee a month or a couple of coffees if you're feeling generous. And coming up next week, we have live office hours, so a good time to join. If you get value from the show and you want more, come on over and join us at patreon.com, patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Right, let's get into the interview. Stephen James is the multi-award-winning and international best-selling author of 21 novels across thrillers, YA and science fiction, with more than 1 million copies sold, as well as the author of non-fiction craft books for writers, a writing teacher, and the host of the Story Blender podcast. So welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Good to be here.
Oh, yeah, great to have you on the show. But first up, tell us a bit more about you and how you got into writing and publishing.
Oh, gosh. Well, the thing is, when I was a kid, I fell in love with stories. My uncle would always, whenever we got together for like the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, and so on, he would take my sister, my brother, and myself into a corner of the room while the other adults had coffee. And we would just sit there and he would kind of get this look in his eye and he'd say, I'm going to tell you a story. And like we were transported to another world. We were swashbuckling with pirates or facing down a grizzly bear in Alaska or flying over the desert on a flying carpet or whatever. And I fell in love with imagination stories and everything. And so I started reading as much as I could, mostly short stories. They had a program at our library called the Paperback Book Exchange, where you bring a paperback book and you leave it and you can take any one of the paperback books that they had. And then you could keep it as long as you wanted. If you wanted for your life, it's fine. Or you could just bring it back as soon as you finish reading it. Anyway, I went crazy over the summers reading
Mhm.
short stories mainly. And as I got older, I was like, I think I want to be a storyteller. And so I actually got my master's degree in storytelling. And so then I started to travel and tell stories, but I had three little daughters at home and I was like, I don't want to be gone 300 days a year when they are growing up. So I ended up starting to write stories instead of travel, and then it just kind of shifted in that direction. That was in 97. Oh my goodness, that's a long 97, 98. And so then I started to write books, and then eventually in 2007, I think my first novel came out. Now mainly I've been writing novels ever since.
It's so interesting. Was it a job of storytelling? Is that what you did before you became a book writer, or did you have a different job?
I mostly would go to events, conferences, schools, and so on, and do like a family friendly storytelling show. So I would tell personal stories, some folk tales reimagined. And so I would go to different events around the country. Yeah, mostly it was that. And then I started, as I say, started to shift. I wrote for magazines for a while, 80 different magazines I wrote for over those years, a couple hundred different articles, stories. And I was like, I was going to try to make a living telling stories. And so the shift has gone back and forth between actually telling stories and writing stories. But these days, I don't know. I'm still speaking. I'm still out there teaching. So it's
Yeah,
still
well,
it's a
that's
story.
so interesting because it's obviously a completely different thing to tell a story in person than it is to write a story. So when you decided to shift that way, what did you have to learn and unlearn? Because your thoughts on the page are so different to when you can make eye contact with an audience.
That's a good point. And I kind of started by telling stories back when I was in college. So I sort of moved from telling to writing. And you're right. There's so much that's lost, whether it's eye contact, pauses. On a printed page, there's always the same amount of space between every word, a space. But when you tell stories, obviously you pause for effect in different places, different areas. And so it's quite different. So if I have an idea for a story, I usually either I have to decide, is this going to be written or told? And then I do it in that medium. And then if I want to, let's say, tell a written story, I kind of have to relearn it or retell it very differently. And you have gestures, body language, all of those things are obviously lost in text. So they are very different. And I think I think for me that it's been good because when I tell stories, I hear different characters speaking. So that when I write, usually dialogue comes fast to me. I can hear what people are saying. I don't always know where they are. I don't always know the setting. I don't even know the scene necessarily, but I'm like, I can hear the dialogue and then it also helps me to step into the characters, like when I'm writing different points of view, so that I think I can do a good job of getting into that character's mind as if I were that person. And I think some of that comes from just telling stories.
I mean, you've taught so many writers over the years, and it's interesting. You said there you hear characters' dialogue. I see visual film in
Okay,
my
sure,
mind.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't hear any voice at all. It's all silent. So I struggle with dialogue, but I do great world building. You
There you
mean,
go.
do you find that this really is different by the author? I mean, I feel like we fall into these different groups.
Yeah, I do. And I kind of feel like that's very true as far as like what comes first, whether it's a description of a place, whether it's the action. I mean, basically a story has dialogue, narration, or we call it sometimes exposition and description. Those three things. Like every story has those three things, and those are the three that we use to tell a story, a novel. And so some people tend to drift into one or the other as sort of their default setting, dialogue, description, or action. And so that's true. And I think also something else that's interesting about writers is they tend to fall into either the camp of being a wordsmith or a storyteller. And not everyone, but I feel like some people are wordsmiths where I read what they're writing. I'm like, man, this is so powerful, evocative. whatever. But maybe there's no story there. It's just like, it's just really interesting, right? Other people just are natural storytellers and they have to really work on the wordsmithing. I think that's me. Like I'm more naturally just a storyteller, but it takes me a long time to get the descriptions to where I want them, to choose exactly the right word. That takes me more effort. Some people that have to build up the storytelling muscles, I have to build up the wordsmithing muscles.
Well, part of the reason I wanted to talk to you is because you talk about this thing called organic writing in your book, Story Trumps Structure, which is out now in a second edition. And it feels like, I mean, I call it discovery writing, so similar
Sure.
to you. But most people in the writing community seem to obsess about plotting and
Oh gosh.
planning. So talk about your process of organic writing. And you say in the book, trust the fluidity of the process. Tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, I remember in high school even when my teacher got up front and he kind of got this very like almost like wise look on his face and he goes, "A story is something with a beginning, a middle, and an end." And I'm like sitting there in high school, like, well, so does a bratwurst. Like, what are you talking about here? Like, a description of a chair has a beginning, a middle, and like the sentence "preheat the oven to 450 degrees" has a beginning, a middle. My view is like saying that a story is something that has three acts is like saying that a pizza is something with three toppings. It might have three, it might have one, it might have five. So the idea for me is not to worry about structure, trying to tick off the boxes of a template, a formula you find online, fill in the blanks kind of a thing, but instead to actually look at what lies at the heart of the story, the character, the tension, the struggle, the pursuit, the pivots and plot twists and the payoff at the end. And as you develop those aspects of the story, I feel like you need to worry less and less about following a formula, and the more you understand what lies at the heart of a story, I feel like the less you need to plot and the less you need to write by the seat of your pants. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you write by the seat." No, I don't write by the seat of my pants because I know what a story contains, so that I know in a certain scene, the character will make certain choices that are unpredictable, but that escalate the tension and different things like that. So, yeah, I'm a huge proponent of discovery, as you say, writing or organic writing. I feel like I won't get the quote exactly right, but Ray Bradbury said something along the lines of plot is the tracks left in the snow after your characters have run by on their incredible destinations. It cannot precede action, is the chart that remains when an action is through. So he's saying plot is not what precedes action, but after the action, you have plot. So the whole idea of trying to plot out a story before you write it is going about writing exactly backwards. Plot doesn't precede action, it's the result. So I always tell people, don't worry so much about the plot. I want you to look at the pursuit. So a plotter might say, well, what should happen? And they'll just come up with something. But an organic writer, a pursuit-based question would be, what does the character want? Now, when I know what the character wants, I will know what should happen. So literally, it will lead me to the story. But just we're focusing on plot will not necessarily lead you to the story. It might lead you down the wrong track.
Mm. And then in terms of your actual writing process, then, do you start writing without, say, knowing the ending? Do you write in order? Is the organic side also on the process?
Yeah, I've never started a book where I know how it will end. So I usually start with a either character that's fascinating or in some cases a premise, a question. And then as I write, I explore the possibilities of where it might go. And so, yeah, it's like I've tried to outline a scene, like one scene, not a whole book, but like, and it never worked. I can't even outline one scene. I've tried. I'm like, okay, that's what I end up with is completely different from it. And so it's just a waste of time and effort for me to try to like outline or
Mm.
plot out a story. I'm much more interested in the pathway the characters will take as they face obstacles and setbacks in their pursuit, as the struggles and the tension develop, what choices will they make? That's how the story will unfold for me.
Mm. No, I'm similar. And then I also wonder, do you do character sheets and character bios, or do the characters also unfold organically?
Absolutely, I don't do any of the sheets and bios and stuff, that the characters really come to me as I write. I begin to get to know them.
Mm.
And so I always tell people like a character with an attitude is more interesting than a character with a background. So a lot of people will spend a lot of time like, where's this character gone to college and what's their first pet's name or all that stuff. And I'm not trying to dump on that idea. I mean, I get it that that can be helpful, but I'm like, how would I know that until I've spent time with them? And once I begin to spend time with them, I'm writing and I was like, nah, this doesn't seem like what that character will really say or do. So I have to go back and like rejigger with the story to hopefully make it fit with that character. And then I like to give the characters some sort of attitude. I'm not talking about like a negative or judgy attitude, but an attitude of maybe it's about something that is unique or different. And that makes them not a template character, not an archetype or whatever, but unique. Sort of this constellation of unique traits, characteristics, maybe wounds, flaws, and so on, that create a character you're like, this is a character like none I've ever seen before. Like I want to spend time with this character.
And then you're spending time with the character by writing what's happening as opposed to writing loads of stuff beforehand and then starting to write. You're actually finding all of this out during the process of writing.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like getting to know someone. Like for now, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to write down Joe's bio or whatever, okay, I'm making stuff up because I don't know you super well. But like if we were to spend time together, hang out, whatever, talk over the course of time, I would start to know, oh, she likes this, she doesn't like that. This is important to her. This is what she would weep or pound the table over, whatever, all of the things that come with time. It's like a friend, a friendship in real life to me. So I can't sit down and tell you what a character in real life would think and say and do if I don't know them. But the more time I spend with them in real life, then the more I'm able to predict that accurately. And I think the mistake a lot of people do is they think, I'm going to get to know this character like with the background. And then they start writing it. And instead of looking at the context, they look back at I don't know what you call it, the background or something like that. And it's like, I always feel like what you mentioned earlier too is like, hold it loosely in your hand, trust the fluidity of the process. And as you're writing, you have an instinct. Oh, I think this character would say this or do this. So trust that instinct, trust that moment in the story instead of trying to go back to an outline, back to a character description or whatever it might be like that. So I'm a big proponent of looking at the context, not just what happened, but what is the result. So looking at the impetus and the implication of the choices and the activities. So like when something occurs, what would the character naturally say or do or think or respond? And then what would that cause? What's the implication that that would have on the rest of the story, on the rest of the characters? So really trying to keep your finger on the heartbeat of the story, like the pulse of the story. That's what I should say. Like keep your finger on the pulse of the story and adapt and as you move forward through it.
Yeah, and I love that. I love all of that. But I also am very aware that you've been in traditional publishing for over 20 years. And one of the things with agents and publishers is that they often ask for an outline. So how do you manage I guess, or how did you more earlier in your career? Because I imagine they just trust you now, but earlier in your career or people listening who want to pitch, but they write in this organic way, how do we deal with that kind of thing?
Well, okay, so there's two good questions. One is about producing an outline for an agent or editor, publisher, and so on. The other is how to pitch a story. So the first is I would write the premise down and maybe a paragraph or two, and then where I think it might go. Basically, I would focus on the questions that the characters will face, maybe the moral dilemmas, the sacrifices they have to make, the world they live in. Like I kind of know that stuff, and I can write a couple paragraphs about that. But beyond that, I just don't know what's going to happen, so I can't really provide. I'm looking at my shelf at the books that I've done, and mostly that's what I've done is like kind of a couple paragraphs, maybe focusing on the premise and the problem, the struggle, and so on like that. As far as pitching a story, I always tell people don't pitch the plot, pitch the pivot. So I think that there's a screenwriter. I think that he talks about this a little bit. I've not read the book, Save the Cat, but people have told me, oh, he kind of brings this up in that book. But the idea is to pitch the irony instead of what occurs. So sometimes when I tell people to pitch or I give them ideas, one process that you can use is like when, must, before, or else. Okay, so like when this occurs, this character must do something before this or else. So you have the character, you have the struggle, you have the inciting incident, you have the stakes, and you have the countdown. So it works good for thrillers. But so for instance, like Jaws, when a man-eating shark starts eating people in a small seaside village, the sheriff must stop him before more people die and the town loses its economy. So there you have when, must, before, or else. Now, but no one's going to buy the story based on that because there's no irony, there's no pivot. It's just a description of the plot. And that's what most people pitch. So I always tell people like pitch the part of the story that you wouldn't expect. So for instance, in there, you might pitch when a shark starts eating people in a small seaside village, the only one who can stop him is afraid of the water. Now you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. How does that happen? What happens there? With like my book, Broker of Lies, so the pitch was something like when a high-level Pentagon redactor ends up on the run, he must stop a terrorist attack before he's neutralized by the people he trusts the most. So the pivot is that the people he trusts at the Pentagon the most are actually trying to neutralize him because he's on the run and all that kind of stuff. So like, why would they be trying to do that? Well, that's interesting. So it's always looking for like the irony, the pivot. Why is this character the last one in the world who would ever be equipped to tackle this problem or face this issue? And then, so that's one way to do a pitch. I mean, obviously there's lots of them, but I think your goal with a pitch is to get them to say, tell me more. It's not necessarily to summarize the whole story. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. So you teach writers. I first saw you at Thriller Fest, I think it was 2012, and you do events and you run writing retreats. So you work with a lot of authors. And I wondered, what are the challenges that you see from authors with, say, 5 books? So not the beginner authors, because obviously there's a lot of challenges, but those
Yeah.
who, let's say they've got 3 to 5 books, things are going all right, but they're like, how do I get to the next level? What are the craft issues or the business issues as well that mid-list authors face?
Well, business, I'm not the guy to ask. Like, I could try to answer that, but I mean, basically, meet your deadlines and write something amazing. And so, I mean, try to be easy to work with, but also stand up for what you wrote as far as like working with editors. It's sort of a fine line you have to walk, you know. But the one thing that over the last few years I've really noticed in a lot of writers who are in that space is that they don't have many pivots. They tend to write predictable stories, and that's why they tend to stay where they're at. Whether it's because they're following an outline or a plot formula or whatever it is. So when I talk about a pivot, I mean a moment in the story where something happens that's both unexpected and inevitable. So for instance, if you're reading a story, you want things to make sense, like you want them to be logical. That's one thing. But you don't want them to be too predictable. If it's too predictable, it's boring. It's like, I'm not interested. So we also want surprises. So we want these two things. We want logic and we want surprise. And when those two things meet and you have a moment in the story where it's like, I didn't see that coming, but that totally makes sense. That's what we want. And we want that in every scene. And I feel like a lot of authors don't have that in every scene. Now, you might say, well, every scene? Like, well, yes, because basically we have those two factors, logic and surprise, can only meet in 4 different ways. Like you could have something that's very logical, but has no surprises. That's going to be boring. It's going to be too predictable. We don't want that. You could have something that is very surprising, but not logical. It makes no sense. A lot of stuff is surprising, but that's not what we want because it's unbelievable. And it's like, what is going on here? You could have something that has neither logic nor surprise, which obviously we don't want that. The only other option is to have a moment that is both logical and surprising. So you have a choice in every scene. You have 4 choices, actually. You can have it be predictable and boring. You can have it be nonsensical. You can have it be unbelievable. Or you can have a pivot. And so I find myself trying to really coach people on pivots. They'll say, "Oh, well, do I need it in every scene?" I'm like, you can choose, but do you want it to be predictable or boring or nonsensical, or do you want it to really drive the story forward? So I think it's because people have been taught structure and plot and three acts and all this kind of stuff, but they haven't been taught this idea, even though it's not something I made up too. Like Aristotle in Poetics thousands of years ago said that he put it a little bit differently, but he said the reversal of the situations, what I call the pivot, is the moment at which the action veers around to its opposite. That would be what I call surprise, subject always to a rule of probability or necessity, which is the logic. So he's basically saying the same thing in just a little bit different language, but you have these three factors. You have logic, you have surprise, and you have them come together in a specific moment. And I don't know why it's not taught more. I just have never found anyone who teaches pivots. I have not found any books. So I wrote a book recently about how to use pivots, but it's so central. And I think great storytellers naturally do it. Like you'll read a book or you'll maybe watch a show and you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. That totally makes sense. But I don't see anyone else out there really focusing on teaching that. So that's a huge thing for me, really to help people move up in their writing to different, elevated to different level.
Mm. And is that Delve, Pivot, Propel?
Yeah, that book came out a couple 2 years ago. We just re-released it. I updated it some, but yeah, I mean, it talks pretty much in depth about pivots and how to actually use those to propel the stories forward.
Well, maybe you could just give us one tip on how to do that, because going back to the organic writing, so let's say I've been organically writing and every time a character has a decision to make, I think at that point about what I want to write and I write it. But then are you kind of suggesting that we go back in the edit and look at the end of every scene and redo it? Because I can't imagine that I would get this right every time. I would need to do that in an edit, I think.
I think for me, when I'm writing, I'm always asking myself a series of questions. And one is, what would the character naturally do? I want to make it believable and natural, let them do it. I want to escalate the tension, so I'll ask myself, how can I make things worse? And then I'll always ask myself, how can I add a pivot to this scene? So as I'm writing a scene, again, I don't know how it will end when I start it, but if I use the first idea that comes to mind, probably a lot of readers would guess that as well, because it's the first idea that comes to mind. It's probably logical and probably predictable. So that's why most stories end up being too predictable. It's because it's like we go with the first idea that maybe we had. So I try to discard that. Maybe the second idea, just discard it. Then I start thinking, okay, now if I've discarded the obvious, what is going on? What's below the surface? So to answer your question, I'm looking for what isn't what it appears to be, or who isn't who they appear to be, or a surprising way to bring together plot threads that I didn't see related before. And so it's always looking for the unexpected, the surprise, because most of the time that is what we're missing now. If you have a great surprise, then you have to lean into making it believable. So you kind of move into that idea of like, well, what would the character naturally do? You can't just have them do something ridiculous and then say, oh, it's for my twist. No, you can't do that. It's got to be, you got to play fair. So it's got to be believable, causally related, logical, and surprising. That's what you're shooting for. So I'm always, just those are the questions going through my mind. So as I'm working on a scene, I'm like, how could I end this? Or include something that people won't see coming right away. And the best ideas always come to me then. So interesting. A lot of people will say, oh, don't write organically or quote by the seat of your pants, whatever they'll say, because then you might write yourself into a corner. I'm like, yes, absolutely write yourself into a corner. That's what I'm trying to do in every scene. And then you write yourself out of a corner in a way that's logical and surprising. It's like the best twists I've ever come up with have been when I've been in a corner. So like, why would I warn people against going to the place where the best ideas await them? That just seems mean. Like, I'm like, why would I do that? No, I want you to have the best possible ideas. So yes, look for corners, write yourself into them, and then write yourself out of them in a way that's both logical and surprising.
Hmm. But I guess also it needs to be genre specific. I mean, we write mainly thrillers, and there is this fine line, isn't it? I love Stephen King, but one of the most unbelievable endings is Under the Dome. I still remember feeling betrayed. I don't know if you've read that
Oh
one, but
no.
I was like, I'm sorry, you've just changed genre in the last chapter of the book.
Oh no.
What is
Yeah,
going on here?
that's actually interesting. The fourth question I ask. So I ask, what would the character naturally do? How can I make things worse? How can I add a pivot? But the fourth question is, what promises have I made that I have not yet kept? So genre to me is a promise. Like you build up a promise in your writing at the beginning of the book. And then I feel like as we write, we have to honor that. So if we bring something up, it's super interesting, bring it back or whatever. Keep your promises, keep your narrative promises. So, so yeah, but it's true of really any genre. Let's say you're writing a romance. Okay. You want to respect the conventions, but not fall into the cliches. So there's going to be a moment wherever the lovers meet, right? They haven't met before. And I don't know what they call it, a meet cute or a cute meet. I think they call it a meet cute, I guess. Anyway,
Yes.
so they're
Yeah.
going to meet, right? And you're like, oh, I'll just have meet. Well, try to do it in a way we haven't seen before. It's like add something else to the scene, add third element, as my friend Bob Degoni likes to say, add something a little bit that we're like, huh, I've never seen that before. And yeah, we know they're going to meet, but let them meet in a way that we don't anticipate, that we can't predict right away, that isn't exactly by the numbers. And then you're going to be on the right track.
Mm. So then, talking about reader expectations and genre, I wondered if I could also ask you about your Christian faith, because many people listening are people of faith, and some people want to write a Christian book, but other people want to bring their faith into, say, a mainstream type thriller in an authentic way. So, how do you balance your faith in your writing? Because I think you have some series that are more sort of Christian than others.
It's interesting when my first novel came out, The Pawn, like a chess piece, The Pawn, back in almost 20 years ago. Gosh, 20 years ago. Wow, 1980. But anyway, when it came out, someone wrote to me and said, is this a Christian book? And I'm like, what would make a book not Christian? I'm like, maybe if it has a lot of like idolatry or witchcraft or maybe sexuality or graphic violence. And I'm like, oh wait, no, that's the Old Testament. And I was like, okay. I'm like, no, that's not. But I'm like, so it's interesting because people have asked me similar questions over the years, like, my books are not sermons in disguise. I'm trying to write great stories that anyone of any background, faith, and whatever will enjoy. But I always ask big questions. I let my characters wrestle with questions that matter, I think. Do my choices matter? Is there hope? Is there a God? Is there no God? Do I have free will? Can I find forgiveness? Can I offer forgiveness? Can I extend it or whatever? So I always try to base the stories on something deeper. And I do believe that there is good and there's evil in the world. That's part of my worldview. So when people talk about moral ambiguity, I don't want to write or read something that's morally ambiguous. I want moral complexity, but I also want moral clarity. So whenever you write, the question is, what are you justifying and what are you condemning? And if you're justifying something that's morally, I would say wrong, actually, then I don't feel like that's the kind of book I would want to write. So I want to write stories that explore good and evil, that explore our world, human nature in an honest way. I feel like when you write honest stories, it's like people, no matter what their background or whatever faith and stuff is, then they will connect with it. I think a lot of people, if they start off with an agenda, whatever that agenda might be, let's say it is a Christian agenda, like I want people to trust in Jesus, let's say. So they write a story. Well, what you're doing, you're actually starting your story with an answer, and, and drama is not built on answers, it's built on questions. So you're actually diminishing the amount of tension. You're also diminishing the possibility of a pivot because we all get it where you're going. It's predictable, but there's probably no surprise. And you're diminishing the payoff at the end because we're like, I saw that coming, like I exactly knew where you were going with this. So instead, I don't start with an answer. I always start with a question, or in some cases, a moral dilemma. Like, what's more important, protecting the innocent or telling the truth? Like, that's interesting to me. I want to know, what would be more, what I would, if I had to choose between the two, would I tell the truth or would I protect the innocent? And it's interesting because people might come down on different sides of it. They might say it's, oh, you should always tell the truth. Or they should, you always should protect the innocent. I'm like, okay, well, let's explore it. Let's literally ask the question. And so yeah, I come from a certain worldview, but I've written characters who have very different worldviews from me. And I'm always just trying to be honest with the character, ask big questions, tell a story that examines human nature and sort of the paradoxes of the human condition in a way that will resonate with really whoever the readers might be.
Yeah, and of course, that worldview is part of your author voice and part of what readers come to you for. But I also noticed that you have some pretty diverse, different series. So,
Yeah.
how do you manage that diversity of series under your one brand? And do you find your readers move from one to the other, or do you have different readerships?
I mean, you mentioned the B word brand. That's what publishers are always telling me. What's your brand? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me what my brand is. Like I've done fantasy, science fiction, conspiracy. I've done spies and police procedurals and crime and suspense, thrillers, whatever. So I would say the one thing that really ties all my stories together is probably just suspense. They are stories with suspense. So some are more high concept thrillers, some are more dark fantasy, but they're built around suspense. So I guess that would be intelligent suspense, maybe if I was trying to come up with a brand, something like that. Because I don't want them to be dumbed down. Like they're not dumbed down stories. So they're a little bit more complex than you might find in other places, but always built around the idea of suspense. And suspense to me is basically my definition is apprehension born of concern. So we're concerned about a character and we're apprehensive because there's peril around the bend or right in front of them. And so I want the readers to really care about a character and then try to build the story and the suspense around that empathy or sympathy that we have for the character.
I think it's really interesting because, again, you mentioned 2007, we're coming up on 20 years since first published. The publishing industry has changed a lot. So, what do you think has changed most in publishing for you? And what are your thoughts on routes to market for new authors these days, or even established authors who are finding that things have changed, which they obviously have?
Well, I mean, I'm at heart, I'm not a marketer. I'm not a business. I'm just a storyteller at heart. And so I just keep writing stories that I would be intrigued with reading, stories that I feel like just are resonant and then I look for publishers for those. I've been to a variety of different publishers over the last decade. I've done some different types of stories, but I feel like you have to just write the story instead of trying to write for a specific market trend or something like that. So I might not make as much as some of my friends. I might not sell as many books, but I feel like I've got to write certain stories if they've grabbed hold of me. There's Native American, I think the Pawnee tribe, and anyway, in the United States. But they was saying that like all the stories that exist are out there already. And when one finds you, it's your job to share it with the world. I think that's kind of interesting. Like, because sometimes maybe it's just true for you. I don't know, Joe, but it's like a story will grab hold of me or an idea. I'm like, I can't shake it. It's like, that's a story that I want to tell the world. I would say that stories are becoming shorter, dumber. People are trying to write faster. They're trying to write several books a year. And as a result of that, some of the quality has gone down. This is all unfortunate. I'm still sort of a dinosaur. I still tend to write longer, complex stories. But I mean, people have shorter attention spans and whatever, and they're not reading as much. The structure of stories, I think, is changing slightly where people will spend more time on a hook to really grab the attention of the readers. And then there might be a longer slow period or more info dumping, which I'm not a fan of. So, but they kind of look like I want to get readers hooked at the beginning and then get them to flip pages. And so I tend to set up my stories a little bit differently than that. Yeah. So I'm not the best guy to ask about marketing and sales and stuff like that. I feel like write a story that will not let you go. And
Mm.
if you do that, I feel like that's the kind of story that will resonate with readers because there's a deep honesty to it. Like you care, you're passionate about it. It's not like just something you're trying to spin out just to sell books. That's my view. Yeah.
But I guess I also feel that writers are doing other things. So you have nonfiction, you have your podcast, you do events. I see you sell books direct from your website. So it's like the business expands into multiple streams of income is what I call it, so that the art doesn't have to pay all the bills.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's interesting. I love to teach writing at conferences, events, and speak at different things. And so I guess if you think about it that way, like my brand might be just story or storytelling or something like that, like really trying to get out there, and whether it's speaking or writing, just tell a great story. So it's so interesting when I work with publishers and they'll ask like, what's your brand? Basically, it's like, what's your box is really what they're asking. What box can we stick you in that will make it easy for us to package you and sell you? And I know myself and just a lot of authors that I know, we don't think in a box. Like, I don't think like every one of my stories is not boxy. It's not the same. They're different. I know a lot of authors like that too. And so it's unfortunate. I get it that it's part of them trying to market and sell the books. I understand that. But I think being honest, genuine with the story, doing the very best you can, writing a worthy book, and then letting them come up with a way to categorize it's probably the best bet. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, we're almost out of time, but this is obviously a podcast and you have a podcast. So tell us about the Story Blender podcast and what people might find over there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Basically, I interview some of the leading writers and storytellers in the world every week. And the goal is for great storytellers to share the secrets of great storytelling. And so I basically pick their brains, kind of like what you were doing with me today, and find out what projects they're working on and really just try to get insights into storytelling. So it's tons of fun. I've been doing it now for a number of years. And I guess I've interviewed over 250 different authors and writers from around the world. And so I always enjoy it. It's a ton of fun. The Story Blender, and people can find it anywhere.
Yeah. So where can people find you and your books and everything you do online?
Probably the best place is stephenjames.net. I think I'm on different socials at Read Stephen James. So you can look me up there, Facebook, Instagram, X, and so on. I think they're all under Read Stephen James. But check out the website. Drop me a note. I always enjoy hearing from readers.
Oh, well, thanks so much for your time, Stephen. That was great.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. Good luck.
So I hope you found the interview with Stephen interesting and encouraging, and I love how completely focused he is on story first. So let me know what resonated with you. Please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or email me, joanna@thecreativepenn.com, and send me pictures of where you're listening or your favourite cemetery or churchyard. Next week, I'm talking to screenwriter Brooks Elms about Prove the Demand, how authors can get the attention of Hollywood. And it's a great juxtaposition to today's show, as it's really different advice and proof that there are so many different ways we can create and reach the people we're trying to reach. There is no one size fits all anymore. So that's coming up next week. In the meantime, happy writing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You can find the backlist episodes and show notes at thecreativepenn.com/podcast. And you can get your free author blueprint at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Facebook and X at The Creative Penn, or on Instagram and Facebook at JFPennAuthor. Happy writing, and I'll see you next time.